That sound. The screech, the hiss, the high-pitched squeal of two machines reaching across a phone line to find each other in the dark. If you worked in an office in the 1980s or the 1990s, that sound is memory itself. The beige machine humming in the corner, the roll of glossy thermal paper curling out warm into your hand, the little printed slip that told you your document had made it to the other side. For 20 years, we were told that this machine was gone, that the internet buried it somewhere around the turn of the millennium in the same quiet grave as the pager and the floppy disk. That is the story almost everyone believes. It is also completely wrong. The fax machine never died. Today it sits at the center of an industry worth $3.3 billion a year. And if you have been to a doctor in the last 12 months, you are using one without ever knowing it. Here's the question that should keep you here for the next 15 minutes. How does a technology first patented in 1843, older than the telephone, older than the electric light bulb, older than the American Civil War, still push roughly 17 billion documents around the planet every single year? This is the business story of the machine we all swore we killed. And it is the story of why that obituary was written far, far too soon. To understand how strange its survival is, you have to remember how completely it once ruled. Rewind to the late 1980s. The fax machine was not a novelty. It was the nervous system of global business. A contract in New York could be signed and be sitting in a printer tray in Tokyo minutes later. No courier, no week-long wait, no airplane. For the first time in human history, a signature could cross an ocean at the speed of a phone call. Law firms ran on it. Newsrooms ran on it. Real estate, banking, shipping, government, all of it moved on that curling thermal paper. By the early 90s, a fax machine was as essential to an office as a coffee machine. And a business without a fax number was barely a business at all. It felt permanent. It felt like the future had arrived and decided to stay. But here's where the story turns. In the mid-1990s, something new crawled onto every desk: email. Instant, free, effortless, and with no roll of paper to run out at the worst possible moment. The technology press did what the technology press always does. It started writing the obituary. Fax was a dinosaur. Fax was a punchline. Any day now, they promised, the last machine would fall silent, and a whole generation would forget that awful screeching sound entirely. Magazines ran the countdown. Consultants sold the future. And for a while, it really did look like the end. Office by office, the beige boxes were unplugged and wheeled into storage closets. The verdict was in. Case closed. Except the machine simply refused to stop breathing. And this is the part almost nobody talks about. While the headlines were busy declaring victory for email, the numbers underneath were telling a completely different story. Even now, deep into the 2020s, an estimated 17 billion faxes are still sent every year, a figure that has barely moved in a decade. Around the world, by one industry estimate, some 43 million fax machines are still plugged into a phone line, humming, waiting. This is not a handful of stubborn holdouts forgetting to unplug a relic. This is active, load-bearing infrastructure inside some of the largest and most regulated industries on Earth. The obituary had one small problem. The patient kept getting out of bed. So, where did all these faxes go? Where is this ghost technology actually hiding? The answer is the strangest twist of all, because it is probably hiding inside your own life right now. Think about the last time you saw a doctor, a referral to a specialist, a prescription sent to a pharmacy, lab results, an insurance claim, a prior authorization, your own medical file moving from one office to another. In the United States, an estimated 75% of all medical communication still travels by fax. The American healthcare system alone pushes more than 9 billion fax pages every single year. Write that again, 9 billion pages. So, if you have handed over an insurance card, filled a prescription, or been referred to a specialist, your most private information almost certainly rode across town the exact same way a contract crossed an ocean in 1988. As a screech down a phone line. You never left the fax era. You just stopped noticing you were in it. Which raises the obvious question, why? Why, in an age of encrypted cloud everything, would hospitals cling to a Victorian idea? The answer is not nostalgia, and it is not laziness. It is the law, and it is trust. In the United States, health privacy is governed by a rule called HIPAA, and a traditional fax quietly satisfies it. The signal travels point to point down a phone line. It never sits on some shared server waiting to be hacked. It spits out a printed receipt with a date and a time. A little slip of paper that stands up in court as proof that a document was sent and received. Email, by contrast, needs encryption, agreements, and careful handling that a small clinic often simply cannot manage. And there is a deeper trap holding it all in place. The network effect. A single clinic cannot quit faxing if every specialist, hospital, lab, and insurer it works with still expects a fax. To leave, everyone has to leave at once, so no one leaves. The machine survives not because it is loved, but because it is trusted, it is legal, and everyone else is still using it too. Now, to really understand this survivor, we have to go back, much further back than you are expecting. Back to the forgotten man who started all of it and got almost nothing for it. His name was Alexander Bain, a Scottish clockmaker born around 1811, a man who understood pendulums and electricity better than almost anyone alive. And in 1843, decades before Alexander Graham Bell would famously patent the telephone, Bain was granted British patent number 9745 for what he called an electric printing telegraph. It was, in essence, the first fax machine. He worked out how to scan a message with a swinging pendulum and reproduce it line by line on chemically treated paper at the other end of a wire in the 1840s. Think about that for a moment. The core idea behind the machine in your doctor's office today was sketched out before the telephone, before the light bulb, before recorded sound. And here's the cruel twist in Bain's story, the part that makes him fit this channel so perfectly. He was too early. The world was not ready for a machine that could send a picture down a wire, and the profits went to other men who came later and refined the idea. Bain fought bitter patent battles, watched his work get absorbed into the rush of the telegraph age, and spent his final years paralyzed and poor, largely forgotten, kept alive near the end by a small charitable pension. The man who invented the way we would still be sending documents almost 2 centuries later died with almost nothing to his name. The machine outlived its maker by 150 years and counting. But Bain only lit the spark. The idea sat mostly on the shelf for decades until an Italian priest and physicist named Giovanni Caselli picked it up. In 1865, Caselli launched something genuinely astonishing for its age, a working commercial fax service in France, sending handwriting and drawings over telegraph lines between Paris and other cities using a device he called the pantelegraph. This was a public, paid image transmitting service running in the same decade as the American Civil War, and still, the technology waited. It crept through the 20th century sending weather maps and newspaper photographs. It was not until 1966, when Xerox released a machine called the Magnafax telecopier, that the fax finally became something an ordinary office could plug in and use. From that quiet beginning, it took about 20 years to conquer the entire business world. And then, as we now know, it refused to leave. And now for the most spectacular part of this whole story, because there is one country where the fax machine did not merely survive, it won. That country is Japan, one of the most technologically advanced societies on the planet, the home of Sony, Nintendo, and the bullet train. In a government survey, roughly a third of all Japanese households, around 34%, still owned a fax machine. Sit with that number, because it means something almost absurd is true. In Japan, there are more homes with a fax machine than there are homes with a video game console. Schools send absence notices by fax. Offices demand it. And in 2021, when the Japanese government announced a bold, modern plan to finally rip the fax machines out of its ministries, something remarkable happened. It lost. Hundreds of official objections poured in from within the government itself, insisting the fax was essential, and the plan was quietly shelved. A national government in the 21st century tried to kill the fax machine, and the fax won. Japan is not even alone. As recently as a 2024 survey, 77% of German companies with 20 or more employees still used fax too. So, let's return to the question we started with, because the answer is not what the headlines promised. The fax machine was never killed by the internet. It was too useful, too trusted, and too deeply woven into the law to die. What actually happened is far more human. We kept saying it was dead, while we ourselves kept quietly using it. Every prescription, every referral, every legal filing, every insurance claim slipping down a phone line is a small confession that we never really let it go. The machine didn't cling to us. We clung to it. That Victorian idea, born from a forgotten clockmaker's pendulum, is now a multi-billion-dollar industry projected to keep growing toward $4.5 billion by the end of this decade, not despite the digital age, but hidden right inside it. So here is what I want to know from you. What is the last place you can still remember seeing a real fax machine, a doctor's office, a bank, a school, somewhere stranger? Drop it in the comments, because someone reading this still uses one every single day and doesn't even think about it. And if you grew up with that screeching sound echoing across an office, tell me, because that memory quietly marks the generation you belong to. If you enjoy the hidden business stories behind the objects we all thought were long gone, subscribe and stay a while. There are a lot more machines we buried too soon, and a lot of them are still very much alive,